Hi, welcome to this video. And in this video, I say here, stop reinventing the wheel. And it's not a criticism, but I do want to talk about, a common phenomena that people want to do some sort of point of need, point of care development, and there's essentially you kind of have to reinvent the whole supply chain and technology. I'm also going to talk about strategy, where actually I'm going to say it quite quickly in that really the best strategy for commercialization is actually find the first 10 paying customers. But let me get to that in the slides. So I've titled this Stop Reinventing the Wheel, and what I mean by that is you may have, or rather, you may have a sort of product idea, and it may be in what we call the point of need space or the point of testing space. I've broadened it because, so I originally used to use the term point of care testing, but point of care just kind of means point of need testing in a medical application. But let's just broaden this out because there's lots of applications now. And I think increasingly so with AI, where actually testing will be done right next to the need rather than the sample coming from the sample point going out to a centralized lab. Anyway, so we're all about decentralization, and to be frank, AI is also part of decentralization. Now you have a sort of point of need. You see an opportunity here. I've represented a doctor, so point of care diagnostics or near patient diagnostics. And people get excited and essentially they rush off to start doing some prototyping. It's kind of rather ironic because, in fact, I've just ordered this chip myself. So when I am, or this board myself. So when people have this idea that they kind of sort of immediately, the way we're taught or the way we're culturally trained is that, we're going to go off and build this idea. But I think there's a more of a new phenomenon around this, and this is what I'll be describing a little bit today. Now, what people say, they'll often contact Zimmer and Peacock, and we'll kind of say, oh yeah, we've got a technology that can help you realize that idea really quickly. And they'll say, yeah, that's great, because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. But to be honest with you, I think a lot of the time, actually, people do end up reinventing the wheel. And I kind of call it the unique requirements fallacy, because in the end, people know it's not efficient to go off, build new hardware, just to really sort of discover whether the business idea or the business model that they have is actually robust. So rather than sort of saying, okay, well, in fact, I am reinventing the wheel, they come up with some, fallacies that what they're doing. For example, they say, oh, I can't use necessarily something off the shelf because I have a unique requirement, and it's multiple analytes. Multiple analytes is not unique. But people say, oh, I need, this number of analytes, and therefore it's an imperative that I actually go off and develop this new technology. They'll have developed something that's actually quite complex. Like when I say lab on a chip for me often kind of means that, the principle is that you'll do something, a workflow that's otherwise done in the lab can be reduced to some microfluidics, pumps, valves, reservoirs, etc. That doesn't lead to a very commercializable product, but the requirement is there that they need complexity, and then everyone requires low cost. So there's often a case that somebody will kind of look at something like the Sensi-All platform from ZP and kind of say, oh well, that's 1,700 euros, it's too expensive. Now that's 1,700 euros for one. I can absolutely assure you that the time and money that you put into rebuilding something of this quality is going to be a lot higher. So they're kind of looking at single unit pricing, saying it's too expensive, when they're really, they're kind of saying, my customer base, for example, can only incur costs of like $50. But of course, for you to build a supply chain and a manufacturing line that could actually produce products at $50, you first have to build that line, and then you have to build enough sales channel that actually that line is justified. But in the instance, what you haven't done at this point is actually proven that anyone really wants this product. So I call these kind of fallacies, and these fallacies are the kind of justifications why, in fact, you are going to reinvent the wheel. The first misstep I see all the time is that people think that in my space, in biosensor, point of care, point of need diagnostics, we're all, a lot of us, are engineers and scientists, and so we like to define problems as being technical challenges. So we kind of think, okay, the reason I'm not moving forward today is because I have not developed this piece of hardware. I would actually argue that the challenge is actually more commercial, and people don't like the challenge to be commercial because it's not really in their comfort zone. And what I mean by the challenge being commercial, I'm going to say it a few times, I'll come to the point in a minute, that actually one of the first things you need to do when testing the robustness of an idea is, can you find 10 paying customers? There's a kind of myth of the full business, and the myth of the full business is, in order to even find the first paying customer, you need the entire ecosystem. You need the supply chain sorted out, you need manufacturing sorted out, you need apps. You'll see me using apps very shortly on my phone. You'll need branding, you've built a business, you've got the logos, etc. Now, some of this is quite soft and you can do it. You need distribution, you need, how am I going to sell the millions, when really the question is how you're going to sell the first 10. And I did come across this this comment the other day, which is somebody didn't actually have much funding, so they said, well, I have little funding, so therefore I'll have to build this myself. And it's almost like, if you've got little funding, whether you go the kind of find the first customer route, 10 customer route that I'm now going to suggest, or you actually you have little funding, but therefore you're going to sort of build a business. It's almost like building a business is not a low-cost effort. So if you don't have much money, building a business is not necessarily actually a good route to actually go by, especially in the idea that I build a business to otherwise avoid cost. It seems a really flawed philosophy. Now, I also come across this quite a bit as well, that the reason that people are not, or rather, if I say to them, have you robustly tested this business idea? Have you found 10 paying customers? And then the reply back will be, I've done market surveys. We've done market surveys and spoke to 10 potential customers. It makes me a little bit sad, because market surveys really existed before the world of MVP, minimally viable products, before rapid prototyping was actually available. So, in order to test out an idea, you'd go out there and, do surveys, and the whole, marketing companies exist to do this. But now we live in a different age where actually you can release products onto the market, test out with real people, and get some feedback. So the idea that a market survey being a kind of a defense that your idea is commercially robust, I think is actually quite flawed. I mean, there's millions of market surveys done a year, but actually how many of those market surveys lead to actually successful products? Extremely doubtful. I'm not even sure that there's that much of a correlation, to be honest with you. In fact, Steve Jobs famously didn't rely on market surveys because he built things that people didn't know they wanted. So a market survey would never, have succeeded with some of Steve Jobs' ideas. The tactic that I'm going to suggest here is, you don't need all of these things. Like, you don't need to have built the product, built the supply chain, in order to actually prove your value. It's a myth that you need to build that supply chain, that manufacturing, those apps, that branding, that distribution, I would suggest. And to say that you do, and that your product is being validated because you did market surveys, I find that makes me a little sad. What you need, and I sort of said it at the beginning, is actually you need 10 paying customers. Now, I'm not sure if this really came from Y Combinator, but Y Combinator say you need 10 paying customers. They actually then say you need 100 paying customers, and then you need 1,000 paying customers. But I think the point is, you need to start, because 10 paying customers are an extremely valuable resource. It's not the money as such, but it's actually the feedback that you get from 10 paying customers. The value of 10 paying customers is more than all the market surveys that you could otherwise do. I know plenty of companies, I can think of one just local to us, it's closed down now, spent 15 years and it relied on market surveys. And in the end, actually, when they first went to market, they got pushback. And rather than hearing, we don't want this product, they just said, oh, well, you do these improvements, we'll have this product. They failed, but then they spent a long time failing, and an expensive failing as well. Talking to people, people will tell you that what your idea is great, etc. In fact, there's even a little bit of a scheme running in the UK, United Kingdom, where they will allow people to go out for 3 months talking to potential customers and getting feedback. People, when their money's not on the line, the feedback you get is biased positive. People don't really want to sit around and tell you your idea is not going to fly, and they may not know. I would even argue that finding 10 paying customers is more valuable than a pitch deck. And in fact, I think finding 10 paying customers actually makes for a much more exciting pitch deck, because then you can tell a new story, which was not my technology, not even the team, though I know, people invest in teams. What it does is it says, who are my first 10 paying customers? And therefore, I would like your money to find my next 1,000 or my next 100,000 or my next million. You're telling a different story. You're not telling the story about who you are and how you got here. You're telling a story about how I found 10 paying customers, and now I want your money to help me get the 100, the 1,000, the 10,000, the 100,000, the million customers. It's a very different value proposition because you've already found 10 paying customers. What do 10 paying customers really teach you? Well, 10 paying customers really teach you is, who is that customer? People, are more exposed now to actually almost, drawing a profile of that, of your first customer, because you've got to sort of almost literally understand who that person is. Well, of course, if you find 10 of them, they are already telling you who they are. You don't have to imagine them, they're actually real. If you find 10 paying customers, you really have found a problem that's, let's say worth solving. But importantly, you're also finding out how much they're willing to pay. And understand that the first 10 paying customers, these are early innovators, early adopters. They will be willing to pay more than the majority much later on. The majority could be the first 10,000 customers, for example. So the first 10 customers can be early innovators. I have bought products of people early on because I wanted to kind of see them succeed, and because I was an early adopter. So you can get a sense of those early adopters will pay more actually. So you'll find out what they pay, but you also understand that what they're paying and what later people will pay is different. But at least you found the first 10 paying customers. Just be a little bit careful of public funding. I see a lot of people raising grant or getting grants. They think it's fantastic, and it is good money because they describe it as non-dilutable, let's say, funding or investment. But governments have a slightly different strategy, but a slightly different sort of requirement. What they're trying to do is, you're possibly an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur does create value and an entrepreneur does create jobs, but you kind of create the jobs through the creation of value. A government just wants to turn you, a government funding often wants to turn you into an employer, and they want to turn you into an employer as quickly as possible. Because what governments want are the jobs and the taxes associated with those jobs. So be careful, because don't be seduced that your idea is actually good because you've somehow raised government grants. In fact, the best investors are actual customers. So did you find 10 paying customers? And then the 10 paying customers actually can make you a stronger pitch deck. And then if you can really win professional investors, VCs, which are very hard these days, but those guys are really going to scrutinize your idea. Government funding, sometimes the bias is, how many jobs are you going to create? And the government's just looking for you to create those jobs, in a 3-year period. Don't forget, elections come round, so if those jobs dwindle away and the job losses are inherited by the next administration, then so be it. So government funding is not a super strong validation that your idea is necessarily that great. 10 paying customers is a good one. I'm just going to do a quick demonstration now, actually, because I'm sort of saying to you in this video, be really careful about the idea that your idea is just great. You didn't necessarily need to go out there and find 10 paying customers. I say that you need to go out there and validate the idea really quickly. So that's why we've produced this Sense It All platform. So what I'm now going to do. So Sense It All is a technology from Zimmer and Peacock that allows people in the point of need testing space to develop new assays very quickly and actually get a tangible product in front of people really quickly. So I don't know what the analyte of interest that you're interested in, but at ZP we have a platform that allows people to kind of allows people to develop a new electrochemical assay, to put it into a form factor that's let's say attractive to non-electrochemists. Much of electrochemical technologies, they're actually put up barriers to actually being able to commercialize them because they're basically potentiostats, and potentiostats, the look, the feel, the software is, I won't say all wrong, but it doesn't make for an easy adoption by non-electrochemists. So I'm just preparing a sample really quickly. I've done that. What I'll do is I'm just going to put that sample onto here. Now what you'll notice then is when this hardware, the SensiAll platform, which is something you can contact us about, is designed, well, it's basically working with my phone. The app is already done. The app is already distributed on Google Play Store, App Store, the Apple App Store. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put RB demo done. Okay, I'm just going to run this really quickly because what I want to say is that this is it's an easy to use technology. Even though I'm going to run something called square wave voltammetry in this particular case, the user experience is quite neat. You know, you saw me. You saw me put the sensor into that. It's really a potentiostat, but into that instrument really quickly. I put the sample on there, hit go, and now it's grabbing the raw signal. Now this is where most, let's say, instruments for rapidly prototyping actually fall down, because what they do is they then leave this person hanging with this raw signal. And at ZP we kind of thought, no. Real people, and I say real people, actually want, and there we are, I've got my results here, 0.429. And that's actually, what I'm doing there is measuring the amount of caffeine in the sample. Now, I appreciate you don't want caffeine. I can appreciate that you want some other analyte. But this platform allows us to lean on the manufacturing that we already have, which means you can lean on the manufacturing that we already have, lean on the hardware that we have, lean on the app that we have. It's very easy to create new apps on the platform. The app is already available for download. So let me just do a quick summary here, which I will do by going to yeah, there we go. Right, so in summary, or rather I did a real world assay there where I took the SensiAll, I put one of our sensors on there, I prepared a sample. I actually use a QR code to tell the app what to do. The app drives the SensiAll, the data comes back, and we have the raw data. We put it through a cloud system called Julie, so I should actually just say that very quickly. That when I did that demonstration, all the data got shot off to the cloud. We processed the data in the cloud, which is really useful, especially when you're dealing with those first 10 customers, because there's, you've just created an assay. It's kind of in its alpha and beta phase. You're launching it to these 10 paying customers, and you're going to have to give them a little bit more support than you would otherwise like to, or rather than that is scalable. But of course, the first 10 customers need to be really taken care of, and what this allows me to do is I can see the demo that I just did. The data's gone straight to the cloud. I can see the raw signal up here. I can also see the process signals as well. So it really gives you a immediate transparency. Somebody says, "Oh, it didn't work," and you're like, "Well, I don't know what to do." You can just go in and look at the raw data. So it really, it's this technology stack that we've developed that has electrodes involved with it, a very user-friendly potentiostat, an app that then is a conduit for both telling the meter what to do. It brings the data and sends the data to a cloud system called Julie. In the cloud system called Julie, we actually processed the data. We did what's called feature extraction. We put it through a universal calibration, and actually we sent back the concentration to the phone. So in summary, everyone says, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. 90% of people are really inventing the wheel, but the justification, and this is, for them sort of, it's a mental trick basically to kind of, they say, oh, well, I've got some unique requirements. Requirements are not that unique. And if you do have unique requirements, you need to simplify the first requirements, because in fact, anything that reduces you finding those first 10 paying customers is what you really should be creatively thinking about. There is the myth of the full business, and I think the myth of the full business is in part amplified by government funding, because government funding, again, is not really trying to support you on you as an entrepreneur. They're trying to support you as an employer. But don't confuse entrepreneurship with being an employer. It's great to employ and have a great team. It is. But you really need to make sure that that idea is robust before you kind of find yourself with 20 people that you have to manage. The real world assay I showed you caffeine detection in this particular case. It's a really ropey old caffeine sample. I need to get some more. But what it demonstrates that at ZP we have a manufacturing line that can make electrodes. We have we fabricate, manufacture those potentiostats. We have an app that's actually available on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And we have a Julie system. Now all of this technology stack in my head started 20 years ago, but actually we've been building this up over 11 years. So you can appreciate the investment that's already happened. In the world of technology, they're always building applications on top of other people's technology stacks, but not in the world of biosensing. There's always this reinvention of the wheel. So if some of the philosophy that I talked about is interesting today, as per normal, don't hesitate to contact us. Okay, thanks very much.